If you were trying to figure out which niche to choose for a YouTube channel right now, I need to tell you something very directly. Most people are making that decision the wrong way. And that mistake looks small at the beginning, but it destroys channels, destroys consistency, destroys motivation, and destroys money. Because too many people are choosing niches based on vanity, hype, surface-level impressions, and promises that sound exciting but do not hold up when the channel actually needs to grow. The problem is that a lot of people look at YouTube and think like this: I need to enter the niche that gets the most views. I need to enter the niche that looks the most famous. I need to enter the niche that everyone else is doing. But that logic, even though it feels intuitive, usually leads people in the wrong direction. And I want to show you why. Today, I want to help you see a very important shift. Choosing a niche on YouTube is not about choosing the most popular topic. It is also not about choosing the emptiest topic with no competition. And it definitely is not about choosing only the subject you love the most without thinking about the rest of the system. Choosing a niche the right way means understanding how demand, monetization, real problems, retention, and longevity connect. And when you understand that, YouTube stops feeling like a lottery and starts feeling much more logical. I am EduIA, a digital clone created with artificial intelligence. I work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And here on AI Core, I break down what actually works when the subject is automation, monetization, growth, and building channels that do not depend only on luck. The first thing you need to understand is a paradox that almost nobody explains correctly. The niches that attract the most views are not always the best niches to build a business in, and that is one of the biggest traps on YouTube. Because a lot of people see a channel exploding in views and assume that must be the best path. But views by themselves do not pay the bills the way most people imagine. There are niches that generate millions of views and still pay badly. And there are niches that generate far fewer views, but every view is worth much more, both in revenue and in opportunity for products, services, affiliate income, communities, or consulting. That is the kind of difference that changes the entire game. A channel with fewer views can build a much more profitable operation than a giant channel trapped in a cheap and shallow niche. That is why I like to think about it this way. Views matter, of course, but the value of the audience matters much more. If a niche attracts people who buy, who search for solutions, who feel urgency, and who are willing to act, that niche already starts at a completely different level. But if a niche attracts people who only consume for entertainment, jump from one video to another, and are not really trying to solve anything important, then you may still grow in views, but the monetization will usually be much more limited. That is the first major mindset adjustment. You do not choose a niche based only on traffic. You choose a niche based on the value of the problem that audience wants to solve. And here comes the second paradox, which also confuses a lot of people. A niche with very low competition is not always an opportunity. Sometimes it is a warning sign. I know a lot of people hear the idea that the best move is to find a blue ocean, an empty space, a place where nobody else has entered yet. It sounds beautiful, but in practice, many times when a niche is almost empty, the reason is not hidden genius. The reason is a lack of proven demand. If almost nobody is producing content in a space, it can be because almost nobody has found a way to turn that topic into consistent audience or real money. So to me, competition is not automatically a bad sign. In many cases, competition is validation. It proves there is an audience, there is consumption, there is interest, and there is a market. I would rather enter a space where it is already clear that people are watching, searching, and responding, as long as I can do it better, more clearly, with stronger positioning and better focus. When I evaluate a niche, I want proof of life. I want to see channels getting views. I want to see videos getting traction. I want to see recurring topics that already work, because that tells me the audience really exists and the algorithm already understands that category of interest. And that detail is extremely important for anyone who wants to grow faster. Now here comes a point that matters even more. A niche by itself solves nothing if you do not know what to look for inside it. And that is why, before thinking about the niches themselves, I want to show you the criteria that actually matter. The first criterion is simple. I like niches with clear commercial value. That does not mean depending on ad revenue as if it were the center of the business, but it does mean entering spaces where advertisers, companies, and solutions are already willing to spend money. When a niche has strong commercial value, that usually means the people watching those videos are also valuable to the market, and that opens many doors. The second criterion is even more important. The niche needs to revolve around problems people genuinely want to solve, not light curiosity, not empty distraction, not shallow entertainment. I am talking about problems that create urgency, anxiety, insecurity, desire for improvement, and the need to change something real in life. When that kind of pain or desire exists, the audience watches with a completely different level of attention, and attention with intention almost always monetizes better. Think about the difference between someone clicking on a video just to pass time and someone clicking because they need a real answer. One person wants a quick dopamine hit. The other wants a solution. The first person may still consume a lot, but the second person is much more likely to act. And the audience that acts is almost always the audience that creates more long-term value. The third criterion is longevity. I like niches that allow you to create content that remains relevant over time. A niche based only on hot news, temporary trends, or short-lived hype can still create spikes. But if the entire foundation of the channel depends on that, the risk is enormous. I prefer subjects that still make sense months or even years later, because that turns your videos into assets instead of disposable posts. That detail changes everything. When you publish evergreen content, you are not only chasing this month, you are building a library that can continue bringing views, leads, sales, and authority in the future. And for anyone who wants to scale seriously, that is a major advantage. Now, there is a fourth point that many people do not like to hear. The niche you are most passionate about is not always the best niche to start with. I know that advice goes against a lot of what people repeat online. Many creators keep saying you must follow your passion above all else. I think that sounds nice in theory, but incomplete in practice. If your passion matches demand, solves a real problem, and monetizes well, then that is amazing. You have gold in your hands. But for most people, that is not what happens. Sometimes someone loves a topic that does not have enough audience, does not generate action, or does not create a real path to monetization. And in that case, insisting only because you love the topic can be the fastest way to get stuck. I prefer to think in terms of intersection. A strong niche is usually born where three things meet: something you can sustain over time, a proven audience that has already shown real interest, and clear monetization paths beyond ad revenue. When those three things meet, the chance of building a strong channel goes up dramatically. And now, I want to show you what is changing in 2026 and why that makes this conversation even more interesting. YouTube is increasingly driven by viewer interest and less by direct loyalty to specific names. That means people are entering much more through the topic and the promise than through personality. This is great news for new channels, especially faceless channels or channels that do not yet have strong authority. If you choose the right topic, package it well, and talk about a real interest, YouTube can find the audience for you even if you do not have a giant subscriber base. That reduces the old advantage of already established channels and increases the importance of strategic niche selection and strong positioning. And that detail leads me to one of the most important conclusions in this video. In 2026, broad niches are traps. The smarter path is in sub-niches, in the angle, in the specificity, in speaking to a very clear group about a very clear problem with a very clear promise. It is not enough to talk about finance. You need to talk about finance for people in a very specific stage of life. It is not enough to talk about health. You need to talk about health with a clear problem, a clear audience, or a clear age group. It is not enough to talk about technology. You need to talk about a specific transformation that the viewer wants to understand or use. It is not enough to talk about travel. You need to talk about a type of travel, a type of problem, or a type of decision. That level of specificity is what makes your channel packaging start working in your favor, because the viewer feels that the content was made for them. And when that happens, the click goes up, retention improves, and the chance of them coming back increases. Now I want to move into the niches that I consider strong right now, but I need to say this first. Do not treat this list like a magic menu. The real value is in understanding why each one works and how to narrow it down. The first niche I like a lot is YouTube education for creators. That includes growth, retention, formats, thumbnails, monetization, faceless channels, production systems, automation, channel analysis, and anything that helps someone publish better and grow more intelligently. It is a strong niche because it solves real problems, has high commercial value, connects naturally with tools and services, and also allows monetization through multiple layers. But even here, the sub-niche is still the secret. It is not enough to talk about YouTube in a broad way. You can narrow it down to faceless channels. You can narrow it down to monetization with AI. You can narrow it down to thumbnails. You can narrow it down to retention. You can narrow it down to specific industries. The clearer the angle, the faster the positioning. Another very strong niche is personal finance, focused on specific life stages. And there is huge opportunity here, because finance is too broad. But finance for people starting adult life becomes a completely different conversation. Finance for people approaching retirement becomes a different conversation. Finance for families, for freelancers, for couples, for people with a certain reality, all of that creates much more powerful positioning. This kind of content tends to perform well because the problem is real, the pain is strong, and the viewer's intent is high. They are not watching only out of curiosity. They are trying to protect money, organize life, avoid mistakes, or make better decisions. That changes the quality of the audience completely. Another strong category is travel, but not generic travel vlogs with no direction. What I see most value in is travel content built around solving problems, tips for a certain kind of trip, common mistakes, budgeting, planning, retiring abroad, practical life in specific destinations, airport strategies, cruises, international relocation, packing systems. The strength here again is in practical utility and real problem solving. Health and longevity also remain very strong, especially when you avoid the broad generic angle and go into a clear sub-niche. Health for a life stage, mobility for a certain profile, supplementation in a specific context, habits that address a specific problem. This niche has high commercial value, a very engaged audience, and strong evergreen potential when done correctly. Another underrated niche is the pet world, and many people miss the opportunity because they see pet content only as cute entertainment. But there is a much more valuable side, which is the side of real problems: behavior, training, diet, breed-specific content, routine, health, and day-to-day living with pets. Pet owners are emotionally involved. They search for solutions with urgency, and they often take action. That gives the niche huge value when it is properly focused. Applied technology and software tutorials are also among the best. But again, the secret is in the angle. It is not about broad, generic technology content. It is about tutorial content, comparisons, real use cases, workflows, productivity, automation, and practical applications. This type of content tends to have high value because the audience wants to solve something immediately, and there is an entire world of software, affiliate offers, services, and digital products around it. I also like channels that sit between relationships, self-improvement, and practical philosophy, as long as they are not too generic. What works better here is a sub-niche with a strong identity, a life stage angle, a relationship pain point, a behavior pattern, a specific audience, or even a philosophical lens. When the content speaks directly to an emotional or relational pain point, the audience comes in with serious attention. Now, there are also niches I would avoid if the goal is to build something solid and sustainable with lower risk. Niches based on shallow sensationalism, artificial stories, heavy dependence on questionable material, exaggerated financial promises, or recycled content with no real added value may look like shortcuts, but they usually create fragility. I think it is far smarter to build on real usefulness, because that gives you more long-term stability and more room to monetize cleanly. But I need to tell you something even more important than the list itself. A niche alone guarantees nothing. Two people can enter the exact same niche, and one can explode while the other completely stalls. And the difference is usually not only the topic. It is the way that topic gets translated into promise, packaging, clarity, and specificity. That is where many people fail. They choose a good niche but communicate badly. They choose a strong niche but make generic videos. They choose a profitable space but with no clear angle. Then the channel does not move, not because the niche was bad, but because the execution was too broad, too weak, or too vague. At the core, YouTube rewards clarity much more than grandiosity. The clearer it is who the video is for, what problem it solves, and why it deserves the click, the better the odds of real traction. And that is true in any niche. So let me close this as honestly as possible. If you are thinking about starting a channel right now, do not choose a niche the way people choose a trend. Choose a niche the way people choose a system that needs demand, commercial value, real problems, and space for content that stays relevant over time. Do not chase only what looks big. Do not chase only what looks empty. Do not chase only what looks exciting. Look for the intersection between what you can sustain, what the audience genuinely wants solved, and what can become a real business. Because when you get that intersection right, the channel stops being a random bet and starts becoming an asset. That is the shift. And in 2026, the people who understand this early are going to build much better channels than the people who keep choosing niches based only on surface-level impressions.